used up a lot of time.
That's all right. But I'll tell you what we're going to do is we do have our question of the week. And this question comes from, oh my gosh, I did not write it down. I will make sure that your name is on the video, but I want to thank you very much for your comments, folks. But this question basically is, what are our favorite Daredevil stories? As you guys know, I'm a huge Daredevil fan, and so I've been asked this question. Yeah, there we go. I've been asked this question many times. You know, what are some of my favorite Daredevil stories? And so I was talking with Damien, and I thought what we do is we highlight some of our favorite stories. But one of the things I want to do is take out the obvious. We're not going to pick Born Again. We're not going to pick The Death of Elektra, because those are obvious, all-time great Daredevil stories. And so we can kind of show you, what we've read in the past, what we like, that's other than those major stories. So, Damien, what are your favorite Daredevil books?
Well, I just, out of egotism, I guess, I wanted to show the very first Daredevil issue I ever read, which is, it's not a great story, but it's still, I loved it as a kid. And one of my favorites was maybe a few years after that. It was I've got kind of the covers here on my iPad. It was a issue by Marv Wolfman, and the artist was Bob Brown with Klaus Janson inking.
Oh, there you go.
And it was this really intense battle between the Torpedo and Daredevil. Mm-hmm. But it had all this sort of questioning, what are superheroes doing, and why are we fighting, and what is the damage. It shows right on the cover here, there's this family whose house gets destroyed while Daredevil and Torpedo obsessively fight each other. And neither Daredevil nor Torpedo are the bad guy, but they end up being the bad guy because they're destroying people's houses.
Right.
And I just loved this comic as a kid. It just kind of flipped everything on its head. And I think Marv Wolfman had kind of an underrated run on Daredevil, maybe because he was the one before Frank Miller.
Right.
Doesn't help. But I think his work on Daredevil is worth checking out if you're really into Daredevil. And they do have the first Bullseye was part of his run. Yeah, I think 131 maybe.
And what's funny about Marv Wolfman and Daredevil, I have his signature on my poster, and I'm collecting all the greatest artists and writers on it. And Marv Wolfman has, stated a number of times that he doesn't feel that he brought anything of value to the Daredevil run. And there are so many of us out here that disagree with that. Damien being one of them, myself is included as well. And I love that run. It's
right.
So well done.
But I bet it's hard for him, looking at the Frank Miller that came after him, and
sure,
But
that issue has all the hallmarks of a good Wolfman story, turning things on its head, and he's such a good writer,
Yeah, and it has the first appearance of Heather, which was one of my favorite. I don't know why, but she's so kooky.
That's for sure.
Kind of a fantasy girlfriend. I wish I had a kooky girlfriend like that.
Well, because we know that Matt is a ladies' man.
Yes. She pretty much throws herself at him.
For sure. Did you have any more?
Oh, you want me to do more?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I actually included I made a copy of the Bullseye cover too. And then, leading into my other choice, an honorable mention to Stan Lee and Gene Colan. I love all the there isn't a total standout issue from them, but I really enjoyed Daredevil versus Dr. Doom.
Yes.
And that leads into my other pick, which is from the Mark Waid Chris Samney run. I loved their version of Daredevil goes to Latveria. He never actually meets Dr. Doom in this one.
No, he doesn't.
But he gets all his senses destroyed by Dr. Doom's lackeys. And it's just so intense. And I realized I reread this last night. What I really love about what Mark Waid and Chris Samney did is how deep inside of Daredevil's physicality they get. And it's really intense. And that's one of the interesting things about Daredevil, of his physical intensity.
Right.
And, you kind of believe that some peak human being could kind of be Daredevil, but it would be very hard, very intense.
Absolutely.
And it was kind of a 2-issue story. So it was Daredevil number 14 and 15, which is kind of meaningless because they're constantly renumbering things. But that's I picked three things. So I picked that as my second favorite story, and then my most favorite Daredevil story. I don't know what you would call it, but it's the 4 issues where they introduce the Hand and Stick.
Yeah.
And I think those are just brilliant contributions to the Daredevil mythos. Frank Miller is like kicking it. Every issue gets better. Every issue he invents new ways to tell stories. It's in my mind kind of a 4-issue story that ends with a new training session with Stick.
Right.
And of course, it's all laying the groundwork for even more famous stories. But I think when I was reading these coming off the newsstand, my mind was being blown. Like comics were exploding in my head, and so I'll always love those 4 issues with the introduction of the Hand and of Stick.
That's awesome. And of course, that cover I've always loved because I'm a huge Gladiator fan, and I've always loved his storyline and how he's evolved. And so great picks, man.
Thanks.
You have no much. I love Daredevil, folks. And so that's awesome. So it was very hard for me to actually make these picks because there's so many stories that I love. And so I kind of had a smattering of things. In modern times of the run, I think Daredevil Yellow has to be mentioned by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, exactly. That's a love letter to Daredevil, folks. I mean, if you haven't read it, if you really like the character Matt Murdock, it takes you back to the first 4 issues of the book, and kind of it's Matt's perspective looking back, and because he's lamenting the loss of Karen Page, and what an incredible love story that book is to the character. And then the last kind of run with Bendis on Daredevil, End of Days. I love the progression of going through all of the characters, looking at the death of Daredevil, and such a great story. And then in Ed Brubaker's run, I really love Ed Brubaker's run on Daredevil, but the very first part of that story, which was called Devil in Cell Block D, this is where Matt Murdock gets put in prison, and I love how it evolves. I mean, he's in a place where you'd never think a superhero would be found, but that was kind of Bendis's way of putting Brubaker in a bad spot. Here, I'm going to put him in prison. There you go, right? But the way Brubaker, there's a couple of pages in this, I think it's 4 issues in that story, where he writes Bullseye, and I don't think we've had the best Bullseye story yet, but the way he wrote Bullseye in that story, love it. Oh my gosh, it brought the gravitas to what the character should be, and I really enjoyed that. And then a run that a lot of people don't really look at that I really enjoyed is Carl Kessel's run. Carl Kessel and Kerry Nord, they hit it in the late 90s, which I think is a bad time for a lot of comic books. This run is probably about 8-9 issues. It starts with the storyline called The Return of Murderous Hyde. It brings Daredevil back to kind of his lighthearted, superhero type stuff that he was in the very beginning. But this background story that's going on, with Mr. Hyde, and going to basically Matt Murdock is representing him in court, right after
classic Daredevil situation.
Right after Daredevil brings him down, right? And great story, a lot of fun, and really love the artwork by Kerry Nord on that. And then my last 2 is I have to mention Guardian Devil with Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada. Joe Quesada, probably my favorite Daredevil artist of all time, and I love that run. How can you go wrong bringing Mysterio in to face our hero? I love Mysterio.
I do too. Mysterio is awesome.
For sure. And then my last pick from the Frank Miller run, and this one took me by surprise way back in the day, and I still love this book now. It's issue number 191, the story called Roulette. And this is basically...
Oh, yeah, I remember the cover of that.
Yeah. And that's where you have Bullseye in his hospital bed, and Matt Murdock brings a gun to the hospital and has a little game of roulette with him as he starts to try to get into Bullseye's head. There we go. Is that it?
That's it, but I haven't found
the cover. Oh, yeah, there it is right there.
Oh, it's not with the gun to his head.
No, but
it's the splash page that I always remember.
Yeah, there you go. The artwork is incredible inside of it, and
Yeah.
it's a fun story, and just like so in your face beyond what you normally was seeing back in comic books back then, and so well done. Frank Miller did both the art and the writing inside of it. I think Klaus Janson did the
Terry
inks.
Austin's the inker, it said.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So that's very unusual.
Yeah, for sure. But hugely fun story, and one of those that always stood out to me. And I mean, because you're having this conversation between, you know, the hero and his nemesis over a game of roulette.
Right.
Which, how can you beat that?
Well, I love in the Frank Miller run, there's the whole question of, should I kill the villains?
Right.
Because there is some logic to killing someone like Bullseye.
Absolutely.
You know, drives me crazy that Batman would never think about killing the Joker.
Right, exactly.
Would kill the Joker in a minute.
Awesome stuff. Well, there you have it, folks. I really enjoy, the questions that you guys leave. Do me a favor, leave your question inside of the comments. I go over them throughout the week, and I'll usually pick one, and we'll go over it on the show. And so that's a way for us to be able to interact with each other and be able to get to know each other as well. So I really enjoy that.